Greetings shippers, welcome back, and it's time to continue our Star Wars updates. This time with not only the ship where the most has changed, but also one of the most tumultuous in the fandom. It's Reylo, the pairing of Kylo Ren or Ben Solo and Rey. Now this ship has had quite the journey, and some would argue that it has some toxic elements, both in concept and in fan base, be they for or against. So not only is there a lot to talk about, but we need to have a little friendly reminder. That being that on this channel, we explore all sides of the relationship, pros and cons. All opinions are always welcome, but keep it constructive, because we're not about bashing ships or the people who ship them. It's just, no, not here. And you guys are actually really great about that, so thank you. You make the comment section a good time. So if you're interested in hearing all about Reylo, then please stay tuned. If it really squicks you out and you're uncomfortable and you're not really interested in exploring some different sides of it, then I'll see you next time. Or we did just update Stormpilot, so maybe check that out instead. Click the card or the link will be down below. So Reylo was actually also one of the early videos on my channel, and opinions were passionate, and they definitely still are. So check that out if you're interested in maybe seeing how people felt back then, or just, taking a trip down memory lane to the old style videos. If you don't have time for that refresher, we're gonna do a brief recap. Before we do that though, I have to say that I was quite amused because even though I said that we were gonna do all these recaps, we're gonna start with them. But don't worry, this is just a start. We're gonna do all of them. You will see all the ones you wanna see.
We're gonna do all of them.
I still got tons of requests for Reylo, so you guys you really want to see it. It's here, don't worry, we're doing it. Also, I saw you Kylux people, don't worry, it's happening. As we will be discussing a film that has been recently released at the time of this recording, spoilers. I know some people just hate any, so small or big, just be warned, because with this ship, they're going to be unavoidable. Now, with all the warnings out of the way, let's get started.
Star Wars The Force Awakens reintroduced the world to Star Wars in a big way. And while opinions on the film varied, most were thrilled to see the franchise return and eager to connect with a fresh set of characters. Of those characters rose two very definitive Force users, one leaning more to the light with Rey and the other leaning into the darkness with Kylo Ren. These two characters met quickly and clashed intensely, and while their interactions were predominantly antagonistic, there were many intrigued by the intensity of their connection thematically and character-wise, and a ship was born. There were many key moments that split shippers, but chief amongst them was the interrogation scene, which some read as hot and a precursor to a more intense connection, while others read it as abusive and akin to rape.
You know I can take whatever I want. You're so lonely. Don't be afraid. I feel it too.
Which led to many labeling the ship itself as abusive, and much abuse was passed on to those who shipped it, with people labeling shippers as abuse apologists and problematic. These arguments, however, quickly became two-sided. More on that later. There were also prevalent fan theories wherein it was speculated that the two characters were actually related, which meant that the ship was also accused of incest, even though nothing had been confirmed. This made some who may have found the pairing appealing wary or ashamed, so they avoided it. And there were some either not drawn to either character, finding them bland, or not invested in the hero-villain dynamic. As a result, this ship of the fandom quickly became volatile. On the pro side, aside from the tension many read as either sexual or romantic, fans were drawn to many aspects which required an expansion of the existing story, which for some was part of the appeal. Some liked the push and pull of light side and dark side, both swirling in turmoil, caught up in a potentially joined destiny. Many sought a redemption arc for Kylo, or Ben as many who enjoyed that thought process called him. Perhaps Rey could bring him to the light, while some loved the idea of dark Rey, thinking maybe he could turn her. As for abuse, some stuck with the idea of redemption, some viewed him as corrupted by darkness, others felt the stakes were very different and the characters weren't together, and didn't know each other as of yet. So to write off that potential based off of one scene when there were ways to make it more nuanced narratively seemed premature. With all of this in place, Reylo was a difficult ship to enter, though some would argue not as difficult as Kylux. However, some were afraid to say they shipped it for fear of abuse, while some shippers became hypersensitive and began to actively return the vitriol they received, even when it was not intense, confusing even queries or constructive critiques and even jokes as attacks. Yet people who shipped it remained loyal, and the ship even made it into 2017's Fandometric list, albeit near the bottom. But that's more more than can be said for Stormpilot, which did not appear at all. So with all of that said, where does Reylo stand now after The Last Jedi? If you don't want any spoilers, get out now, because from here on out, they are unavoidable, as this film turned everything on its head, and left many shippers jumping in the aisles with screams of, "I told you so." The relationship between Rey and Kylo is a huge portion of The Last Jedi, and the pull they feel towards each other comprises the majority of their narrative arc. It even ties together with their individual growth. The film dives straight into their similarities, their confusion over their place in the universe, their loneliness and the uniqueness of their connection to the Force, their comparable rise in the darkness and the light. It even explores how the two are fond of each other and presents strong hints that were it not for the circumstances around them, they would be at the very least friends. The two share some of their most intimate fears and desires with each other, canonically, and a good deal of the scenes are framed and shot with a romantic leaning. Indeed, with the way these scenes were framed, if this was not the intention, it would be truly shocking. From a flustered Rey seeing a shirtless Kylo Ren, to a joining of hands across galaxies, to standing far too close together in an elevator, to Ben taking out a major character to save Rey, to both wielding each other's lightsabers, even if one still doesn't ship these two, their relationship was impossible to ignore. As a result of this, the fandom landscape has completely changed. Essentially overnight, suddenly shipping these two was no longer taboo, or at least significantly less so. This exploration of these two characters in this film made them both feel more three-dimensional, and their relationship was extremely nuanced, explored in a way many in fandom had insisted it could be. This built upon their actions from the first film to create sympathetic circumstances that laid a foundation that led to many being able to see the path to forgiveness, even if some were still not sold. And indeed, if one really didn't like their relationship, this film may have been a bit hard to sit through. The worries of incest were also removed, though some claim one cannot trust the words of the film's antagonist. And the abuse element was tempered by an expansion into a narrative that gave these two much more in common and elevated the stakes beyond their scenes in The Force Awakens, as the two characters became literally linked in one of sci-fi's earliest romantic tropes, the telepathic connection. When people use the phrase practically canon, it is to describe instances such as this. Where it goes from here has yet to be seen, but it has been set up to be a tragedy. It now has canonically achieved the complexity fans felt it was capable of in fanon. It now has many new shippers. Converts who were swayed by the new film, newbies who hadn't seen the chemistry before but are now sold, and the tried and true who have been shipping the whole time. Getting into Reylo now will be better for new shippers than it was after the first film, The Force Awakens. However, the fandom is still somewhat difficult to navigate. Now, it must be noted that there are many awesome Reylo shippers who ship and let ship and are just there to explore their pairing, be it for the dark aspects, for the fix-its, for the smut, for the redemption, for the fluff, whatever it is, and they are content to just be. However, that is not all Reylo shippers, nor is it the habit of those who do not ship to leave them be. While with the new film, some fans who did not ship took a laissez-faire attitude of it, still not liking it but shrugging it off, some were actively angered by the legitimizing of what they view as a toxic pairing. There are some who use Reylo to attack all heterosexual shippers, assuming A, it is only them who ship it, and that they are actively blocking other ships, such as Stormpilot. Others claim that they are better than Reylo shippers, as they do not ship what they do not condone in real life, and that these shippers are harming abuse victims and creating unhealthy relationship standards. And the retaliations are just as vicious, with shippers claiming such people are just virtue signaling or lack the creative depth to separate fiction from reality and explore complex concepts, and that people should avoid white knighting. And on all sides, people are quick to call the other thin-skinned. And of course, it at times simply devolves into vicious personal attacks, again on all sides. It is possible to avoid this on the more moderated sites. However, on more discourse-heavy platforms such as Tumblr or Reddit or Twitter, it is easy to get caught up in a fight. However, even there are exceptions. Still, with this new apparent canon endorsement, it is possible things will calm down, as the film very much presents these characters as equals, capable of making their own informed choices. In many ways, the two are forced in a way to choose destiny and duty over their own desires, even though it must be noted that their desires do also coincide with what they ultimately end up choosing. There's just a lot to explore narratively, so it's easy to see why so many were and still are drawn to this ship. Of course, not shipping it is fine too. Some fear Kylo is on his way to borrow some leather pants from Draco, and others still see no chemistry, and some are still worried they are related. They haven't forgotten the first trilogy. Others don't really ship in Star Wars or in general. Others are ambivalent, and there are some who are simply just not enjoying this new trilogy. Although not enjoying a material is not necessarily a barrier when it comes to shipping. However, if you are a shipper, this ship is having a huge boom. New fics, new art, new everything, so there is tons to check out. As always in fandom on all sides, we should strive to be kind to each other and articulate our ideas, even dissenting ones, with respect and an open mind. One should not assume the motivation or appeal or the lack thereof care of for a person for them. And one should definitely not act based on a pre-assumed judgment, as the aforementioned paves the way to toxicity. And we of course must not forget all of those who have been shipping kindly, multi-shipping, aren't shipping this because they simply have other ships entirely, or have managed to slip into this fandom and avoid any and all negativity. If one gives it a chance, Reylo has a fair bit to offer, particularly if one likes dark and doomed ships or redemption. And if one doesn't like it or it makes them uncomfortable, there are plenty of more ships out there.
Are you guys Reylo shippers? Did the movies sway you? How do you feel about how much attention was dedicated to these two in the film? I have to say, if you're all about the fix, especially the Force Bond tag, now is your time. It was really cool to revisit a ship that has changed so much. Now we'll just have to see where it goes from here. Hopefully the toxicity of it dies down, because that is never a good time for anybody. As always, thanks so much for watching, and let's get to that outro.
This has been Shipper's Guide to the Galaxy. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Follow me on social media to stay up to date with all the fun updates and other videos that are coming up soon. Special thanks to all of my patrons' names on the side. I'm gonna have some fun announcements about that coming up soon, so stay tuned for that as well. And as always, keep watching, because there are as many ships out there as there are stars in the sky.